Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Shauna Knight, and I'm a staff attorney at the Small Business Legal Clinic at the Lewis and Clark Law School. Our clinic provides legal transactional services, business services, I should say, to small businesses as well as emerging businesses in things like contracts, reviewing leases, trademarking your business name and logo, doing copyrights, and also looking at regulations and helping you sort through them. And that's where we are today. So this presentation is called Navigating Your Agricultural Small Business Through the COVID-19 Rules. Because you won't have the attention span or probably the time to sit through a great big long presentation on what these rules are, I'm going to give you a really broad overview, tell you where you can get some more resources, and also go through a scenario on how the rules could maybe apply. But otherwise, we're going to try to get through this pretty quickly. So I know that a lot of people are really stressed out about how on earth they're going to remember all of this, and we'll talk about that too. Just so you know, a little bit of housekeeping. We created this presentation on July 15th, and things change pretty quickly and often. So this presentation might not apply if the rules change, and we'll be taking it down off our website if that occurs. Also, just as a disclaimer, because I'm an attorney and I like disclaimers, this presentation is for informational purposes only. If you have specific questions about how these rules apply to your business, then you should definitely consult with an attorney. This information is not going to be legal advice that's going to be specific to you, but hopefully will be helpful in getting us through all of this. So yeah, things keep changing so fast. Things are crazy and it's not you. So here are some sites that might be helpful in keeping track. First and foremost, Oregon OSHA is where the agricultural temporary rule is coming from. They also have a ton of guidance, checklists, and frequently asked questions you should look at. Federal OSHA also has some helpful information, signs, and other things that you should check out. The CDC, of course, is where we're going to find out all of the medical information about COVID. This will help you with being able to determine symptoms, maybe help with policies on whether you're screening or having employees do self-checks. Oregon also has a coronavirus site that has some extra guidance on top of the Oregon OSHA temporary rule for things like masks, things that employers and employees should know. And we'll have links to that throughout the presentation. Another thing, especially if you're an employer to know about, is the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. They have released a bunch of frequently asked questions to help you with avoiding things like discrimination, especially as COVID affects people who are at higher risk, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but keep in mind that I'll have some more resources for you at the end of the presentation. Before I leave this slide, I just want to point out some other really helpful resources. The Oregon Farm Bureau's COVID-19 resources include really detailed written and printable steps following these rules. They have videos, they have other resources for you. Sometimes government websites that take a long time to get updated, but your local news often has their finger on the pulse of things that are changing, so I would keep an eye on them as well. And then last but not least, there are financial resources as our operating costs go up, to have the masks, have the gloves, have the PPE, have the that's required. That makes all of our expenses go up, and you should certainly check out the Oregon Food and Security Farm Worker Safety Program for financial resources in helping implement these new rules. So I'm just going to jump right into a scenario that we're going to apply some of the rules to. So take Liz. She owns a farm outside of Salem, which supplies produce to local restaurants, grocery stores, and even CSA boxes. Maybe a little bit more CSA boxes than she had in the past, just because of how the shutdowns and reopenings have affected restaurants. During different harvest and planting seasons, she often hires anywhere from 25 to 45 temporary workers to help, depending on how fast things need to get done, what the weather is doing, and things like that. Workers are often within a couple of feet of one another, so she's concerned about how she's going to be able to follow the rules and have folks be safe and not have have a COVID outbreak among her workers or affect herself or her family or her business. So she wants to know what can she do? So here are a couple of links and also some information on what to do. I've got links on the top to the actual rule, as well as OSHA's frequently asked questions and videos. We're also going to talk a little bit about guidance, Oregon Health Authority's guidance for agricultural workers and their guidance on KN95 masks. Say that 3 times fast. So things that you have to do under the temporary rule is provide and pay for all protective gear that's needed. That's not really a change. OSHA has always required that you always provide any necessary protective gear. It's just that things have gotten more dangerous lately, so that the gear needed has increased. You're going to need to appoint a social distancing officer and make them available. They don't necessarily have to be in the field, but they do have to generally be available for questions, training, and also enforcing the physical distancing rules. So you need to plan and to maintain 6 feet of distance between workers. This is really difficult when you have to apply more people to get the work done quicker, say if the weather is going to affect your crops or your ability to plant. So the Oregon Health Authority has actually come up with some additional guidance saying, well, you could also provide some cloth masks, or more importantly, KN95 masks, if you're going to have to work within 6 feet. The Oregon Health Authority guidance generally recommends cloth face masks, but for within that 6 foot distance, so say for example, Liz needs to have workers within a couple of feet of each other, they're really pushing the KN95 masks. However, here's the rub. The KN95 mask and the cloth mask can be really hot and make it really difficult to breathe if conditions are really hot or people are doing a lot of physical labor. So I think small businesses are going to have to be a little creative in what they consider their workday, considering, starting the day earlier and ending later, and maybe not having work or having fewer workers during the hottest parts of the day, so that either you can have people spread out safely, or if people are working close together, they're not in danger when wearing those masks. So it's not a perfect solution, but it is available. Also making sure that they're providing potable water with single-use cups or drinking fountains, make sure no one's reusing anything and spreading the virus. You have to provide 1 toilet and 1 hand washing facility for every 20 workers, and you need to sanitize that at least 3 times a day. And that sanitation requires sanitation following CDC guidance for actually killing and removing the virus. So not just your average cleaner, they actually need to be very specific cleaners that will help kill the virus. You also need to provide notice to the workers of the risks of COVID-19 and where they can file complaints if they're not comfortable with how the owner is working, or if they think conditions are dangerous. It's required that you provide them this information. So that's what the rule requires, but here's like a couple of other tips that might be helpful. You can use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is allowed, but maybe you shouldn't rely on it for field operations. Hand sanitizer only works on hands that are free of debris. Otherwise, you're just sanitizing the dirt on top of your hands, and that's not good. You can also provide more hand washing facilities than required. Just make sure that you're taking care of the gray water afterwards and receptacles for any paper towels to dry hands so that they don't become another way to transmit the virus. Make sure that you reduce meetings and group gatherings to 10 people or less, or make sure people are outside and spread out. It's a good idea to train workers on COVID symptoms and dangers, how to physical distance and proper hand washing, so that you're not doing all of the work. People understand how dangerous the virus is, and they can also self-screen and self-check for symptoms. Make sure that all of this is in a language that the employees understand. Federal OSHA especially and Oregon Health Authority have signs and other information available in multiple languages that you can take advantage of. And you're not required to provide everyone with masks and disposable gloves, but it might be a good idea to do so, provide people at least with cloth face masks. Disposable gloves will also help prevent the transmission of the coronavirus, and which will help prevent an outbreak at your workplace. So there's a few more things, especially with the temporary rule. There's some more requirements if Liz chooses to provide housing. There's a new checklist that Oregon OSHA has provided, some more additional cleaning requirements, cleaning and sanitizing at least twice a day, some bunking requirements to make sure people are further than 6 feet apart unless they're family members, another person in charge of social distancing and sanitation, and making sure you isolate sick employees and work with Oregon Health Authority if folks are sick and showing symptoms of COVID-19. There's also some additional precautions. If you're providing transportation, you're not going to be required to be 6 feet apart in a vehicle where maybe there could only be 2 of you max. But there are still some space requirements like 3 feet apart, some partitioning. So if you provide transportation, take a look at the Oregon Farm Bureau resources, take a look at the actual OSHA temporary rule to see what those requirements are. More likely than not, you're an employer and not just a business owner. So as an employer, you want to know the COVID-19 symptoms yourself. This link will take you to the CDC website for all the latest information on confirmed COVID symptoms. You know, we started in March with 3 known symptoms, and now we have a pretty long list, including really strange things like loss of taste of scent, taste of smell, and sense of taste. You might want to consider screening your employees as they come to work, whether that's asking them certain questions or taking their temperature, or you might want to make sure that your employees do self-checks before they come in, both of themselves and anyone in their household that might be sick or have been exposed to someone who's sick. As an employer, you might want to consider sick leave. If a worker can't afford to stay home, they're more likely to come in even if they're sick. There is a federal law that was passed called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Sorry, I had to refer to my notes there. It's the FFCRA, and it allows you to provide up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave to workers and get reimbursed on your taxes, either when you file your taxes later in the year or immediately when you're doing payroll taxes. Just be aware that there's special IRS forms for that. If you have more questions, reach out to an attorney, or here's a link to the Department of Labor that talks more about the FFCRA. One really great resource you should know about, especially if you're really sweating the rule, is that Oregon OSHA provides free consultations. I've used them myself. They're really nice and they're really helpful. They can also review and help you with some of your policies. They're just a really fantastic resource. They reply also very quickly, so I recommend that you take advantage of that. Make sure you avoid policies, discriminatory policies. Make sure you make the same opportunities available to all of your workers is a really good rule of thumb. If you have more questions about that, the next slide will talk about more resources. Remember that just because you can doesn't mean you have to. You are allowed to operate your small business under these rules, but maybe you've decided you don't want to be open this year. Or maybe you've decided to pursue something else or provide more protections than the rule requires. That's absolutely allowed. And one final thought, especially if you have customers coming to your site, you can absolutely turn away anyone with COVID-19 symptoms. So with that, really, really quick overview. Thank you so much for listening. I've got a lot of free resources up on the Small Business Legal Clinic's pandemic webpage. If you're not ready to talk to an attorney, but maybe you have some general legal questions, we have a portal for that. But if you are ready to talk to an attorney, please consider enrolling as a client with us. We would be happy to serve you. And you should know that the Small Business Legal Clinic has a rural program that serves small businesses in rural areas with less than 35,000 people. The cost, if you qualify, is $25 for up to 10 hours of legal help. So if that's of interest, definitely enroll as a client. You'll be working with me as I work in the rural program, and I really look forward to hearing from some of you. Other than that, I hope all of you take really good care of yourselves and each other, and please let us know if we can be of any help in supporting your business. Take care.